Now let me say right off the bat that St. Ignatius was not a great theologian. He was, and most of what we have in the spiritual exercises, all of it pretty much, is not original. And I think you'll see that in the course of his life. St. Ignatius was born in 1491. He was born in the Basque country of Spain to a family of minor nobility. And so he lived a nobleman's life. This was sort of in the high era of chivalry and knighthood in Spain. And so his interest, he spent time at the Spanish court. His interests, therefore, were knightly glory. He fell in love with lots of the ladies and dreamed of doing gallant deeds. And he got into trouble several times for dueling. And he was a soldier. And in fact, he fought in the Battle of Pamplona. It was the Spanish against the French. And he really distinguished himself there in that battle. The French were winning quite handily, and he was going around rousing the troops to continue the fight and to not give up. In the course of that battle, he took a cannonball in the leg and was badly injured. The French were so impressed with his valor and his courage that they returned him home, actually, to his family's castle in Loyola, where he had a very long and very difficult recovery. And during that recovery, he asked for something to read. He wanted romance tales of knights and ladies and things like that. There were none in the house. All they had was a book of the lives of the saints and the life of Christ. And so he started reading these. And he would spend his time either thinking about, his knightly deeds of heroism, and in particular, there's apparently some woman at the royal court who was way above his social status that he fantasized about being able to do something great so that he could win her hand, and so he's thinking about all these tales. But then he would read the lives of the saints and the life of Christ and think about imitating their lives and think about their form of heroism, which was quite different. And what he noticed after a while, and this is a very important sort of discernment that he made, was that as when he enjoyed, it was pleasurable to think about either of these things, but that when he finished dreaming about following the lives of the saints, he continued to be satisfied and to be happy and have a sense of peace that continued to abide in him. Whereas when he was fantasizing about the worldly deeds, once he finished, he felt dissatisfied and discontent. And by recognizing this in himself, he recognized that the way of life he was called to, the better way of life, was to imitate the saints in the following of Christ. And so once he recovered, he left his life behind and began the life of a pilgrim. Now what he did was he basically dressed, this was a social institution at the time, he dressed himself in a simple robe and went around begging to the pilgrimage sites, and his final destination was the Holy Land. But before he got to the Holy Land, he would travel from place to place, and he would engage in spiritual conversation. He would find the holiest, most spiritual people that he could find, monasteries, priests, lay people as well, and learn what he could from them about the spiritual life. And he threw himself entirely into the pursuit of God in prayer and penance and in the life of a pilgrim. And he made a lot of mistakes, but he also learned a lot. And this was where the spiritual exercises came from. He wanted to be able to help souls to know God through prayer. And so through what he learned all along this way, through trial and error and through his conversation with spiritual people, he developed a way to help people. And that eventually became the book of the spiritual exercises that we use today. He had no intention of starting a religious order. He made it to the Holy Land. He wanted to stay in the Holy Land and help souls in the Holy Land. The Franciscans that were in charge there told him no, it was too dangerous, and threatened to excommunicate him if he didn't obey. So he went back to Europe and continued to try and help souls. He realized that in order to do it well, he needed to be educated and even to become a priest. So in his 30s, he went back to learn Latin. He eventually ended up at the University of Paris, where he, through giving the spiritual exercises, a group of men developed around him. They eventually took vows of poverty and chastity, and a third vow to go to the Holy Land and spend their lives there working to help souls. But they said if we can't get to the Holy Land, they gave themselves 1 year, then we'll instead present ourselves to the Pope. And for whatever mission he assigns to us. And in fact, they were unable to get to the Holy Land. That's what they did. And they ended up starting a new religious community called the Society of Jesus. And that became the Jesuits. Now, what was the sort of founding principle of this new religious community? This is from what's called the Formula of the Institute, which is the foundational document that was approved for the first time in 1530, and then in its final form, 1540, and then its final form in 1550. This is how it begins. Whoever desires to serve as a soldier of God beneath the banner of the cross in our society, which we desire to be designated by the name of Jesus, and to serve the Lord alone in His church, His spouse, under the Roman Pontiff, the Vicar of Christ on earth, should, after a solemn vow of perpetual chastity, poverty, and obedience, keep what follows in mind. He is a member of a society founded chiefly for this purpose, to strive especially for the defense and propagation of the faith, and for the progress of souls in Christian life and doctrine. Okay? And the reason I bring this up is because this is some of what I'm trying to show you here is a little bit of what are the fruit of the spiritual exercises, what comes out of it. What kind of people does it develop? And it's people that want to live this form of life in one way or another. And St. Ignatius was very clear that you can lead this kind of life either as a Jesuit or even outside of the Society of Jesus, outside of the religious order. This is something that many people can do. What really sets the Jesuits apart, because there are lots of people that do this, is what we call the fourth vow. And as I said, what they had originally vowed to do was to present themselves to the Pope for whatever missions he would send them upon. And so this became a part of the permanent identity of their religious community. So this is how it was expressed. In addition to that ordinary bond of the three vows, we are to be obliged by a special vow to carry out whatever the present and future Roman pontiffs may order, which pertains to the progress of souls and the propagation of the faith, and to go without subterfuge or excuse and at once, as far as in us lies, to whatsoever provinces they may choose to send us. Okay? And so we get a sense here of the apostolic nature of the fruit of the exercises. That again, it is concerned not with resting, but with really sort of going out into the world and being of service wherever and doing whatever that may be. Now, in practice, what this has meant is that the Jesuits have come to be known. The way that they have most often served the church is as missionaries and in education. So that's primarily what we tend to get known for. You know, we have 28 universities and colleges in the United States. The number I always knew was 46 high schools, but I see in the new stuff, we actually have more now. I think it's 56 now, because they've been opening these new Cristo Rey high schools for inner city kids. And so these are the things that we have come to be known for. I want to talk a little bit along this theme about saints that have been formed by the spiritual exercises. Because they're not only a testimony, I think, to their power and their importance and their usefulness, but they also give an indication of the kind of person that is produced by the spiritual exercises. There are currently 50 canonized Jesuit saints, with one on the way. St. Jacques Berthieu will probably be canonized in October. He was just announced in December. We have here, this is a wonderful book about Jesuit saints and martyrs. I tried to get the number of Jesuit blesseds, but I couldn't find a reliable number anyway. There are hundreds of them. So there you have that, and this is priests and religious pray the liturgy of the hours, which includes a calendar of saints and celebrations of saints. So we have a special little supplement for all of our saints. You can take a look at. So as you can see, a lot of them. I want to talk completely randomly about some of my favorites, just to give you a little sense of things. Probably the most famous, even more so than St. Ignatius, is St. Francis Xavier. He was one of the first Jesuits, St. Ignatius' college roommate at the University of Paris, who initially was quite hostile to Ignatius, thought he was too holy, but he eventually made the spiritual exercises and became Ignatius' closest friend. He's the patron of the missions. He was really about the first person sent out on one of these papal missions, and that was to India. Once he got to India, he was unstoppable. He was going to village, preaching the gospel and baptizing people, and just kept going and going and going all around Southeast Asia. Finally got up to Japan, was the first to preach the gospel in Japan, and then decided he had to get to China, and he died, unfortunately, before he could get to China. This is a quote that he wrote in one of his letters back. During his lifetime, he was even quite well known in Europe as a missionary. And so this is one of the letters he wrote back that I think is a great thing to read at any college or university, but maybe in particular Duke. He said, "I have often felt strongly moved to go to the universities of Europe, especially Paris." He was an alumnus of Paris. "Crying out like a madman, and say to those in the Sorbonne who have more learning than goodwill to employ it advantageously, how many souls are missing heaven and going to hell through your negligence? If only while they studied their humanities, they would also study the account that God will demand for the talent He has given them. Many might feel the need to engage in spiritual exercises so as to discover God's will in their hearts and embrace it rather than their own inclinations, saying, 'Lord, here I am. What would you have me do? Send me where you will, if necessary, even to India.'" That's Francis Xavier. I'm going to go through these pretty fast. I can keep going on. St. Aloysius Gonzaga, patron of youth. He was an Italian nobleman who forsook his princedom in order to join the Jesuits. I love this picture of him. He died as a scholastic after helping plague victims, and so many of the pictures of him, he's this little weakling, looks like a little boy. But in fact, he contracted the plague when he helped a man who was dying from the plague in the streets, picked him up and carried him back to the house to care for him. And that's the picture of him. So he couldn't have been a small guy. I mean, he must have been pretty strong to carry a dying man. So anyway, I like that picture. St. Robert Bellarmine, a doctor of the church. St. Peter Canisius, another doctor of the church, who preached against the Protestant Reformation in Germany. If you do an overlay of the parts of Germany that remained Catholic with where Canisius preached, they're almost the same. Edmund Campion was martyred during the, what do we call that, the Elizabethan period in England. This is great. I mean, he was like, what, head of his class at Oxford, but decided to become Catholic, which made him an outlaw. Even worse, he came back as a Jesuit priest. So he was undercover, going around saying masses. He was finally ratted out. But before he was ratted out, he had written this, Campion's Brag, which became rather famous. And this was addressed to the Queen in case he was ever caught. It said, "Be it known to you that we have made a league, all the Jesuits in the world, whose succession and multitude must overreach all the practices of England. Cheerfully to carry the cross you lay upon us, and never to despair your recovery while we have a man left to enjoy your tyranny, or to be racked with your torments or consumed with your prisons. The expense is reckoned, the enterprise is begun. It is of God, it cannot be withstood. So the faith was planted, so it must be restored." He was tortured for 6 months, trying to get him to abandon his Catholic faith, and finally hanged and drawn and quartered. St. Isaac Jogues was a missionary to the American Indians, specifically the Huron tribe. He was at one point captured by the Iroquois They gnawed off his fingers there. You'll notice his fingers are missing there.